Hey, what's up everybody? It's Snak Pak. We're back with one more video dispelling some myths from the DC Midair crash that happened last week. We have a whole new round of myths we have to dispel, so I'm here to do that for you. I'm a Black Hawk and airplane flight instructor, so I'm just going to take some of these things that have been going around on the internet and we're going to dismantle them piece by piece. All right. This video is not to tell you what exactly happened in that crash, because the truth is nobody knows. And a bunch of people are going to comment in the comment section of this video and say things like the helicopter's at fault, they were in the wrong place, ATC gave the wrong orders, it was their fault. We don't know yet. The NTSB is currently taking a fine-tooth comb to all of the details of this accident. And I mean, it's going to be a massive investigation. The amount of detail in this investigation is going to be staggering, and they are going to put all the pieces together and they're going to let us know what happened and who is at fault, likely. Right? But right now, nobody knows, so anybody who says they know is lying to you. Right? All we can do right now is make conjecture, but this video is specifically made to dispel the rumors and myths around this accident that have been coming out in the past several days. Last thing before we get started is, if you have the means to give to any of the families who have had a loved one killed in this accident, please do so. In the description of this video, I've linked to the GoFundMe page for the families and crew of the CRJ, as well as a fundraiser for the crew of the Black Hawk that's been put up by Brotallion Blue Skies Foundation. So please, if you have the means, go give them $1 or anything you can afford. I'm sure they would really appreciate that in this time. As an added benefit, all of the revenue from this YouTube channel in the months of January and February will be donated to that Brotallion Blue Skies Foundation fundraiser for the crew of Pat 25. All right, let's get into some myth dispelling. Okay, I thought I had covered this in the first video, but apparently some people didn't believe me, and we're just going to dispel that right now. So you can see here's Pat 25, and here is Republic Airlines 5752 that had just departed from DCA on runway 01, and it looks like they're on a collision course. And if we play the footage, it looks right here like they narrowly missed or tried to hit them, but we just hit one extra button here on ADSB Exchange, and we can now see their altitude. And here we go, Pat 25 is at 800 feet, and Republic is at 7,900 feet. So there is over a mile of vertical separation between these aircraft, and they weren't anywhere close to hitting each other. A really good indicator when you see these videos is just the colors. All right, the warmer the color of the aircraft on ADSB Exchange, the closer they are to the ground. Here comes Blue Streak 5125. They're at 4,800 feet, 5,100 feet, and Pat 25 still at 800. It looks like they came within close proximity, but there was over a mile of buffer between them. And here's the third aircraft on departure. They're already 3,800 feet, and Pat 25 is descending at this point. So they missed each other by 4,000 feet, which is absolutely adequate for vertical separation. Okay, a lot of people have said that the helicopter would have been nose down, right? It's a very common belief that helicopters, when they fly, they have to pitch nose forward in order to fly forward. And that is true for most helicopters. But for a Black Hawk, the transmission is actually tilted forward already. So even though the rotor disc, right, remember the rotor disc are the spinning blades on top of the helicopter, even though those may be pointed forward, if you tilt the whole transmission forward and build that in your design, then the rest of the helicopter can lay pretty much flat when in forward flight, when in cruise flight. So here's a little video. You can see that Black Hawk there was pitched up for a minute to make an airspeed correction, but it was pretty much flat. Let's look at another one. So here are several aircraft flying in formation. I'll just pause it, and you can see this Black Hawk right here. It looks pretty much straight level, and there's really not a problem with pitch attitude. So they're not pitching forward, right? The rotor discs are already pitched forward, so the rest of the helicopter is fine. So when the NTSB is considering the view of the crews in this investigation, this is undoubtedly going to be part of their investigation, and they're going to see that the crew was flat pitch. We've also been hearing a lot about the experience level of the crew members, and some news reports came out about a low-time crew member having only 500 hours or 450 hours. All right, let's look and see what the Code of Federal Regulation advises and requires for anyone to get a pilot certificate. Right, we call it a pilot license, but the FAA refers to it as a pilot certificate. So this is a Code of Federal Regulation, Title 14. Chapter 1, Subpart D, Subchapter D, Part 61, Subpart E, 61.109. Okay, this is where you can find it, and this is on ecfr.gov. But this is part of the Federal Aviation Regulation, right? There's a big book that pilots kind of live by called the FAR AIM, and it's kind of two parts. We're going to talk about the other part here in a minute. But right here, 61.109 details the aeronautical experience requirements. If you want to become a pilot, let's say you want to become a pilot of an airplane with one engine, right? Let's say a Cessna or a Piper, right? Some of the more popular airplanes out there today. What do you need in order to be allowed to fly that aircraft? Well, first of all, you're going to need to take some tests, all right, some written tests through the FAA, and you're going to need to do a check ride with a designated pilot examiner. But before you can take that check ride, you have to pass that written test, and you have to meet these aeronautical experience requirements. And here's the big number, all right? Airplane, single engine land rating, must log at least 40 hours of flight time. That means exactly what you think it means. You can have 40 hours of flight time, you can take a check ride, and then you can have a pilot certificate. And as long as you maintain your currency and do your biannual flight reviews, you can fly wherever you want as long as you comply with all the regulations. In DCA, you're going to see these big blue rings on this map. This is a VFR sectional map, and actually this is a terminal area chart, right, which zooms in a little bit. You see these big blue rings indicate Class Bravo airspace. And yes, even a private pilot with just over 40 hours is allowed to traverse this airspace as long as they comply with all the regulations. So 40 hours is all you need, all right? And then the same applies if you scroll down here to C for a helicopter rating, all right? It says the same thing. A person who applies for a private pilot certificate must log at least 40 hours. Now you're allowed to have passengers on board as well, all right? If you want to fly a more high-performance aircraft, it requires a little more training. But anybody can just take off in a Cessna with these minimum requirements. Now, if you want to be a commercial pilot, all right, meaning you're doing it for hire, well, here we go to 61.129, and it tells us that we need to log at least 250 hours. So if you want to get paid, you got to have at least 250 hours. Now, nobody's probably going to hire you at that hour level, all right? And we come down here for a commercial helicopter rating. Look at this. Helicopter class commercial pilot certificate with a rotorcraft category and helicopter class rating must log at least 150 hours of flight time as a pilot. If we talk about somebody with 450 hours, I mean, they're greatly exceeding the FAA's minimum requirements for a commercial pilot, all right, commercial level pilot. And remember, there's 2 pilots on board of a Black Hawk. It requires 2 pilots to fly. So there was a good amount of time in that cockpit, and that will be considered by the NTSB about how much flight time that crew had. Definitely be considered, but it's not out of the ordinary at all. All right, so like I said, it's completely legal for somebody with just over 40 hours to fly a helicopter or an airplane in the busiest airspace in the world. All right, totally legal as long as they meet the requirements and they've been checked by a designated pilot examiner and demonstrated that they're competent in all of their tasks. Now the big question that everybody keeps bringing up. How high was this Black Hawk? Everybody in the comment section, a lot of the people commenting on previous videos have said this is the Black Hawk's fault because they were too high, right? And it's just comment after comment after comment, all right? So what is the truth behind that? The truth is we don't know how high the Black Hawk was. We have some preliminary data, all right? Some of it is MLAT data based on this ADSB Exchange website, and I'm going to tell you this data is not very reliable, all right? It's going to get you close, but it's not going to give you anything exact, all right? We're still waiting on the NTSB to examine the black box and the cockpit voice recorder from the Black Hawk, all right? That is going to be the key in giving us the information we need to know how high they actually were. But there are conflicting reports, and as you could see in some of the news reports, there's conflicting reports about where the CRJ was and where the Black Hawk was according to their own instrumentation and radar instrumentation. And it was so close anyway that we're talking about a very small margin of error, all right? So let's real quick talk about margin of error, all right? What is an acceptable error for a pilot, right? If I tell a pilot, like if I tell a student pilot, I want you to maintain 2,500 feet, all right? If they're at 2,503 feet, is that unacceptable, all right? If they're too high by 3 feet, or if they're too low by 17 feet, right? Is that unacceptable, right? What is an acceptable level of error, or do they have to be perfect right on that altitude? Now, I'll tell you, as I've got about 2,000 hours total flight time, it'd be very impossible for me to maintain exactly 2,500 feet for an entire flight. I might be able to stay right on it within a couple feet for a good bit of time, but I'm probably going to deviate, 10, 20 feet if I'm really focused on maintaining that altitude. Okay. Aircraft are not easy to fly. I can guarantee you, if anybody who's never flown an aircraft, you try to maintain altitude, the first day it's going to be a disaster, all right, which is why it requires so much training, all right, so much dedication. Some very advanced autopilot systems will keep you very close to your altitude that you configure it to do, but it's still not going to be perfect, right? Even the best flight directors are not going to be able to maintain things perfectly. There's turbulence, all right? There's updrafts and downdrafts. There's so many factors that despite all the best stability augmentation systems and the most advanced aircraft, we still can't get it perfect, all right? So there has to be a buffer, all right? What is that buffer? Let's find out. Here, we're going to look at something called the Private Pilot Airplane Category Airman Certification Standards, okay? So this right here is available on FAA.gov. Anybody can look at this. And this is what those pilot examiners, right? These are the people who do your final check ride to see if you're going to get your license that day, right? Your pilot certificate, or if you're going to fail and you're going to have to try again another day. And if you look through here, you're going to scroll down and we're going to see a little table of contents here. And we have these different areas of operation with different tasks, okay? I'm going to come down here to area of operation 3 and go to task B, traffic patterns. So this lists some knowledge that you need to have, talks about risk management, and then right down here at B, traffic patterns, task B, skills, identify and interpret airport base runways, okay, comply with all recommended traffic procedures, okay. Let's look at this one right here. Maintain traffic pattern altitude plus or minus 100 feet. Plus or minus 100 feet is a very, very important part of this sentence, because if you are taking your check ride, you're getting checked out, you've done your written tests, you've done all your training, you've met all of the requirements to get your pilot check ride, right, and to get your pilot certificate and be allowed and legal to go fly these aircraft by yourself without an instructor, all right, you have to be able to maintain plus or minus 100 feet of your assigned altitude. When we hear all these news reports about the Black Hawk being 100 feet too high, well, this is an FAA standard, okay? This is a buffer. This is a minimum buffer right here. All right, now if you exceed this on a check ride, you may not end up failing, okay? If you exceed your altitude by 150 feet and you correct and you say, hey, I see my altitude's incorrect, I'm correcting my altitude, a lot of the DPEs will say, okay, well, you realize your error there and you're fixing it, okay? And a lot of them will pass you. Some of them will hard fail you for that, and some of them will be a little more lenient. You don't have to be absolutely perfect on these check rides to pass, all right? But you need to demonstrate that you're safe and you're complying with regulations, and then generally speaking, you can maintain within these standards, all right? And there's different interpretations of different examiners about that, but the truth is, if we're looking for a hard number, it says it right here in the ACS, okay? And then it says the same thing in the commercial ACS. So now I want to talk about one other thing about altimeters, all right? So let's say that the Black Hawk, we'll just imagine that it was 100 feet too high, and that the collision happened at 300 feet. What was their altimeter reading? And what was the altimeter reading on the CRJ? So this is a video I took yesterday from the cockpit. We were on the ground, all right, and this is a Cessna 172. And this right here is a Garmin G5, all right. It's basically a multi-instrument display. It tells us a lot of information we're going to need to do this flight. And right here on the right side is the altimeter. Now I'm on the ground, so why does it say 360? So I was at this airport right here, Kilo Echo Delta November, and every airport on these VFR sectional charts is going to have a lot of data associated with it, right? This number right here, this 361, all right? 361 is the airport elevation. This is the airport elevation above the sea level, above the ocean level, all right? Everything's based off the average ocean level or the mean sea level, right? We call it an MSL figure, mean sea level. So above mean sea level, Enterprise is 361 feet. If I were to come down south here to the coast, and I'll look at, here's Tyndall Air Force Base, it says 17 feet. This airport's 17 feet above the ocean, right? Much less than 361 because it's over here by the water. Airfield elevation is very important when you're trying to figure out if your altimeter is valid for the flight. Now, there's also local altimeter settings. Okay. All right. So in order to get a valid altimeter setting, we're going to have to find a automated weather system here. All right. So we're not getting one at Enterprise right now, but we'll come up here to Shell Army Heliport here. Okay. And you can see there's this little code underneath in this little yellow box just to the right of my cursor. And you'll see a number there that says A3011. All right. That means the altimeter setting is 3011 or 30.11 inches of mercury. When I come back to this video, you can see right here on this flight I did yesterday, the altimeter setting was 30.14 inches of mercury. All right. Pressure changes constantly, all right, depending on the weather system that you're in. If you're watching from overseas and you guys use the metric system, your altimeters are set in millibars or hectopascals. But here in the States, we're all rebels and we have to use the standard system of inches of mercury. So 3014, and this is calibrating our altimeter for current pressure. All right, and these numbers update regularly. We get automated weather observations that will tell us, hey, you need to dial this number into your altimeter setting for it to be valid. Now watch what happens. I'm going to change this number, right? In this video, I'm going to reach over and move this little knob. It's going to change this altimeter setting, and you're going to see the altitude reading is going to change as well. So as I move this dial, altimeter is changing. You can see it move back and forth, all right? Now, how do I know this altimeter is valid? If we look real close, it's a little bit between 360 and 380 here, right? It's not giving us an exact number. It looks like it's reading about 365. So is that valid? All right. We saw on ForeFlight that it says, or on SkyVector here, that it says the airfield elevation is 361. So I've got an error of approximately 4 feet here, right? Does that mean I can't take off because my altimeter is not calibrated properly? So here we go. We're in the Aeronautical Information Manual. All right. And here we have altimeter errors 7-2-3. All right. And right about here, let's see. Scale error may be observed while performing a ground altimeter check using the following procedure. Set the current reported airfield altimeter setting in the altimeter. That's what I did, right? That was at 3014, and that's what I was hearing on the automated weather system, all right? Read the altitude on the altimeter. The altitude should read a known field elevation if you are located on the same for reference to scale. Okay, so we know what the field elevation was. It's 361. If the difference from the known field elevation and the altitude read from the altimeter is plus or minus 75 feet or greater, the accuracy of the altimeter is questionable. It depends on what mode of flight you're flying in. If you actually need that altimeter, believe it or not, you actually don't need an altimeter on all modes of flight, according to the regulation. But undoubtedly, these two aircraft needed their altimeter on. And so we can see up to 75 feet of an error, and that's legal. That is totally fine. You can take off a 75-foot error. So it is quite possible, I don't think it's likely, but it's possible that both of these altimeters had such an error that they were both reading the same, or they were reading different altitudes, but they ended up at the same actual altitude and had an impact. So I hope this clears up some of the myths that are circulating around the internet right now. It's aggravating to say the least, but understand that we don't know who's to blame for this accident yet. Of course, you're going to see everybody commenting down below that I'm, blaming someone, I'm blaming one party or the other, or I'm defending, the ATC or the Black Hawk crew, but it's just not true. I'm still waiting for the answers just like everyone else is. But this video is just meant to dispel some of the myths and some of the untruths that are floating around the internet. So I hope this cleared some things up. Thanks for watching. And tomorrow, I'm hoping to get some information. We know in the news today, a lot came out. There was a congressional hearing with the NTSB investigators, and they started talking about ADS-B and how the UH-60 didn't have their ADS-B on, and they may have violated some kind of rule. Well, tomorrow I'm going to do a whole video on that. I've got some information coming in from some friends, hopefully. Hopefully I get it, and we're going to talk about exactly what happened there, all right, at least as much as we know. All right, so thanks again for watching. Snak Pak out.